Elevator systems. Bowen family systems theory in brief for a life of learning. Welcome to Elevator Systems, where we look at ideas from Bowen family systems theory in brief and understandable ways. Today, we are delving into the topic of technology, specifically AI, or artificial intelligence. And since this topic is well above my pay grade, I'm very thankful to have Dr. Patrick Stinson joining us. Welcome, Patrick.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
Patrick combines 25 years as a software architect with clinical training in family systems. He's a doctor of psychology who studied at the California Institute of Integral Studies and has done pre- and post-doctoral internships at the Bowen Center in Washington, D.C. Patrick founded Alaska Family Systems, developed the Family Diagram app, and is also an AI engineer architect at Micron Technology. His 2020 dissertation on problems in psychological science provides the intellectual foundation for his work. So, Patrick, can you give us your pitch on how Bowen theory is useful in thinking about and engaging with AI?
Yeah, I flipped it around. So, because I think about it in the other direction. So the state of the art of Bowen theory is basically, scientifically, is a qualitative or conceptual model, which means it's in your head. You make predictions in your head. And AI's made it possible to run the model formally outside of your head. And this changes everything for real research, though it'll be costly and tedious for a while.
Right.
I think an elevator pitch is supposed to be 3 sentences.
Yes,
that's
it's supposed to be
the
short.
amount of time to go to the 10th floor. Okay.
Yep. Mine often are very long elevator rides, but I think I did okay today. So my elevator pitch is, again, I'm always thinking about what concept is useful to me in thinking about AI. As I thought, family systems idea of societal emotional process, how a new event, so AI is kind of a new event. Maybe people can debate how new. Like if a family member comes into a family or exits a family, can stir predictable responses in people. And how there will be such variation within and between families about how they respond to this new thing being in their lives, from high anxiety and intensity, which I think in some families looks like panic, to a calm, thoughtful interaction with this new thing being available to them. So that's what I want to think more about today. Dixie, what have you got?
I wanted to start with the last time I did a class on computers. It was on a Commodore 64 in 1993 in junior high. So I was thinking, what do I bring to a conversation about technology? And I got a little anxious. But then I thought, what do I bring? And so I was a history and philosophy major. So I've done lots of thinking about thinking and what change looks like across history. And I think that Bowen theory contributes a lot to what thoughtful versus anxious thinking looks like and what influences individual and group reaction or response in times of change. So my elevator pitch is thinking for yourself in a world that can do the thinking for you. And I think Bowen theory gives lots of different avenues to think about and observe that in yourself and in the world. And I wanted to say, I started thinking for yourself in a world that can do the thinking for you. Thinking in isolation is not the goal, but it's important to consider what of your thinking you outsource to others, including AI. So I have a couple other pitches. One from Dr. Bowen: man's brain is part of his protoplasmic totality. Through the function of his brain, he has learned many of the secrets of the universe. He has also learned to create technology to modify his environment and to gain control over most of the lower forms of life. Man has done less well in using his brain to study his own emotional functioning. And then finally, because this is an episode on AI, I thought AI should have a chance to give an elevator pitch. So I threw into ChatGPT and give a 2-sentence elevator pitch on how Bowen theory is useful in thinking about and engaging with AI. And here's what ChatGPT said. Bowen family systems theory helps us see AI not as an isolated tool, but as part of an emotional system where human anxiety, values, and relationship patterns shape how it's designed and used. Thinking in terms of differentiation, triangles, and emotional reactivity lets us engage with AI more thoughtfully, responding with intention instead of outsourcing judgment or amplifying collective anxiety. So those are the pitches.
Now I just want to know how. What in the heck? How does it do that, AI?
I
Anyway,
didn't really understand the AI pitch very well.
But it was trained on some decent data. It got some of the lingo right. So there's that.
Yeah.
Anyway.
Yeah.
So what are thoughts?
Patrick, what stands out? We always let you go first.
Okay. Well, it's kind of funny. So Katie, you basically, I heard you say something happens, and then if you're, I think you were talking in the context of a family, that there's enough uncertainty in there that everybody's sort of trying to sort themselves out, and there's all this cascade of reactivity or process or something like that follows. So it's event followed by a cascade is what I was imagining.
Yeah,
anyway.
some predictable pattern. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, that kind of thing happens so many different places, and it's obvious day to day in my job at a big tech company, because our mandate from the CEO right now is use AI as much as possible. That's half shareholders, half company driven. And we're like, okay, what does that mean? So everybody's doing the best they can to measure this kind of stuff. And but we're finding our way. It's kind of chaos right now. It's wild. So there's this cascade of reactions, and everybody's trying to make sense of what it means to even use AI. It's too broad. The definitions are vague, and I'm sure it's a parallel process.
Yeah. And I think you picked up one of the things that I wanted to talk more about, which was kind of the variation and how different people will go through this time. Like it sounds like this is something that is really changing the way people are living at some level, right? Potentially. So there's an adaptation that's going on in families and individuals as they're going through that. And I think that there will be a variation in how that happens. So some at your company might be more thoughtful about how they're initiating this process, and some might be more just reactive and anxious, I guess.
Yeah, right. And then, the thing with Bowen theory, I always thought that what does thoughtful mean? What does intelligence mean? And I always thought it's where you can really hit the nail on the head when you've got a problem faster or something like that. It's really outcome based. It's like who can solve our problems faster with it, versus reactivity that just causes problems or increases the error rate, as engineers like to say. You're missing the mark more, and maybe even it creates more problems after that. There's also a dimension of that is just how informed certain people are. You have certain people who, like, I know a hell of a lot more, and I'm going to go on a limb here. I know a hell of a lot more about what's going on with the stuff than you guys do.
100%.
And it doesn't really freak me out, but I'm also obsessed with it. And so I know all the intricacies about it. And I know the things that are the guardrails that can go in place in companies, for example, that keep the humans in the loop to verify what's going on. And it's not like the machines are taking us over. And I actually think it's going to create more jobs than just eliminate and all this stuff. But so there's being informed as part of it. I don't know. I'm just throwing stuff out there.
Yeah. My question that came from that was thinking about, like, how does the average person who doesn't want to do a career in AI get pretty informed about things? I mean, where, it's a piece of technology, right? So I was thinking about this from a counseling context, and one of the organizations, the major associations, has put out a policy of how to use AI and how to think about it with your clinical practice. And one of the number one things was understand the technology that you're using, right? So not to use a technology that you're unfamiliar with, because that borders on creating situations that could be unethical, where if you're using things that you don't understand. So how does the average person begin to think about, how do I learn this?
I don't know how you do that. For the AI in particular, I mean, I'm a domain expert there. I don't really know, other than playing with it, but most people aren't going to do that. It's, YouTube is an incredible innovation. And most people probably are in cat video territory with YouTube,
It's a great
It's like,
place
what
to
are you
be.
going to tinker with how to make content? No. And what are
No.
you going to go into an AI app and really mess around with it and get really familiar with the personalities of the different models and their proclivities and how to keep them in bound? Like, it's too much. So I don't really know, but how did it work with the previous technological innovations with the internet and TV, radio, electricity, agriculture? I bet there's similarities. That's
Yeah,
what I wonder.
Yeah, I think, and there'd be some ways where I say I have a computer that I'm using in front of me, and there's things that I definitely am skilled at knowing how to do on this computer. And there are definitely things that I don't know how to use, but are still probably a part of the things that make this computer function.
Yeah. Right. I wish I had an answer to that question, because I watch. So back to the Bowen theory anxiety part.
Mm-hmm.
I'm watching everybody around me all the time. And it's in the news, it's controlling your 401k. It's like everywhere. And no one knows what to do with it. I mean, mentally. No, I'm the only person I know that I run into face to face anyway that has anything to do with this professionally and really knows anything about what's going on. I'm up in Alaska. There's not a lot of technical people up here.
Yeah, fair.
So it's just, it's fascinating. It's wild to watch all the uncertainty.
Yeah.
And just the question to me is, what do you do when you've got all this uncertainty, and how do you get it organized enough so you can calm down?
Yeah.
I guess. I don't know the answer to that with AI.
Well, come on.
Without becoming, graduate level studies or whatever. Yeah. I was just curious if you wanted to unpack your pitch that sort of flipped the script.
I put a video about this on my website that a number of people like yourselves who are interested in Bowen theory seem to be able to pick up fairly easily. I was trying to lay down some pretty, I think, deep concepts, but I mean, this is what I've spent all of my time in Bowen theory on, except for my own family stuff, is what's the state of the art in Bowen theory and how do you get it to escape the bubble? Because I believe it's kind of, it's stuck in a bubble, and outside the bubble, it's like a therapy technique that's in a family therapy survey course in a master's level program. And that's kind of what Bowen is, right? So the state of the art for Bowen theory is that it's a conceptual model, and it's a really interesting conceptual model. At least it has a predictive model that is conceptual, meaning it has kind of a logical train of thought that you take with, if you can take a neutral position, this triangle will calm down. And, there's a change back move that's kind of predictable. That's 3 stages, that all these concepts. And when something is a conceptual model, it means that it runs in your brain. That's what a concept is. A concept is like binary for computers. It's concepts in your head. And that model exists. It's scattered throughout all of the most read Bowen literature and training programs, basically. And it takes a long time for people like yourselves and me to get it in our heads so that we can agree and have a common language. And that's a barrier that I've been thinking about and working on a lot. And so anyway, but the answer to the question is that what AI, the first thing that this AI revolution has produced is the ability for machines to understand natural language extremely well. They can hear what you mean when you are writing this English language, right? And you probably both know that now, because you've gone onto ChatGPT or whatever it is, probably, and typed some stuff in, and it's like, oh my God, it understood what I wrote, right? So what it's doing is it's instead of being a very prescriptive X plus Y plus Z equals A type of rules-based system like all software has been, it actually uses concepts and can make sense of them. And so when you have in the literature and in the training of Bowen theory, and again, it's scattered around everywhere, you kind of have to figure out how to get it all together. You've got these concepts that are really consistent with each other, and people have a common language, and you can make some predictions logically. Well, AI can do that, technically speaking. And there was no way to even approach that problem until now with Bowen theory. It was just stuck. It was too hard to figure out how to research it in any kind of broad way and in a compelling way for formal professional researchers or anybody with money to understand. And so it's not like you can hit a magic button and now you can, get it to do what I'm talking about, like take a bunch of data from a family and produce a couple predictions. That's kind of the slam dunk, right? But with a lot of work of getting the right context in place to feed into the AI, then it's a technical possibility now. And that's a really big deal. It's not like anybody's, but except for an obsessed person like me, is going to pick that up, you know, because you have to have these combination of skills or a ton of money.
Yeah.
But it is a technical possibility now.
So is this a bit like, in a previous episode I mentioned Dr. Kerr in Bowen Theory Secrets. He looks back at, I think, Adam Lanza and John Nash, their family stuff, or people have looked at the royal family or some presidents. If you plunked in a bunch of people that there's a lot of data about their family, their history, you would get something out of that, either through your app or through, like, what would that practically look like?
Well, speaking of Mike Kerr, you know, he's the only one who really tried to formally lay out how you evaluate a family, and it's in chapter 10 of his 1988 book, Family Evaluation. And he did a pretty good job. It's, as far as I can compare with my opinions and also all of my training, did a pretty good job of laying out all the information you need to really actually do a theoretical formulation for a family in a clinical sense, right? You know, 3 generations, you know, what's the baseline configuration of the triangles and what are the mechanisms that are used? And it just goes on and on and on. That's kind of cool. And when you take all of that, then the whole point of Bowen theory, the reason you have a theory is so you can take a whole bunch of context or information like that and then predict some things. That's the function of a theory, more or less. So yeah, that's exactly what I'm talking about, is that at least in the highest sense, what's possible now is to do that. You've got a lot of work to get there, but say, you know, here's the main way to understand how emotional process tends to unfold in this family. Given, like Katie's example, AI shows up. Nobody knows what the heck it is. Now there's a cascade of emotional process. Somebody dies. And now it's like, what, you know, everything's crazy. And the patterns that play out ought to be kind of predictable. And that's what you're trying to get a hold of with the machine.
When you've been at this for quite a while and thinking about this, as you see it, what do you begin to watch as you're able to have AI kind of, I don't know, I was going to say think, I don't know if that's the right word, work through these? I mean, because I appreciate what you're saying. Like, the computer can hold so many more variables and work in such a substantially quicker and more streamlined way than my brain could ever.
And cheaper.
Yeah, and cheaper.
Your brain's more expensive.
Yeah.
I hope so anyway. Anyway, go ahead.
Like, what, as you have really watched this, have you been able to see it come to fruition? Like, are you watching the theory stand up in the face of this evidence?
Well, okay, let's see here. In a nutshell, in any formal sense, I'm not there yet.
Okay.
But because in order to be able to produce predictions, let's say about a single case, and then watch and see if they play out, which is really what matters. Of course, you want to be able to do that across many cases too, in order to be able to publish something like that. But that, in order to get there, a lot of things have to fall into place first, and you've got to have a way to collect data that's very systematic. It's called a data model, and then you have to have a way to make sense of it, which is called a predictive model, which is what Bowen theory is conceptually, but we need a mechanical way.
Right.
And to do that, you need a lot of domain experts coding cases and saying in the data model, saying this is what happened in this case, and you have to be in the same format as every other case that you code. And then that becomes ground truth to train the AI model. It makes a prediction, and then you eyeball verify it. So I've got the infrastructure built. I've got the training app, the way to code the thing, you know, the website. I've got a little bit of a working group going. And then the family diagram app, along with the coming personal app, has a way to generate some data. And then we're also dumping audio interviews on there and transcribing them and then coding that for more data. But, you know, all this stuff has got to happen before you can get to the point where you have a model that can make a prediction that you can test. And I'm kind of in the middle of that.
Because what I think is what I get a little excited about it, and for the record, also still think therapists will also have a job, is
Definitely.
I think when a clinician using Bowen theory makes a prediction, I think it's so challenging to not have user bias in there somehow, where like I'm seeing my outcome, right? Like that's why they do double blind studies, right? To say
Right.
that I'm not influencing what I see, or as a clinician, I'm not influencing what I'm predicting in this family. I think that that's one thing that interests me, because that's always, I think as a clinician, if you're as neutral as possible, you don't want to predict that this triangle is going to lead in this direction. Maybe this cutoff here might be a benefit to this family, 3 generations from now. So how do you get as neutral as possible? And I think that is one advantage of a computer versus a clinician in that process.
Yeah, I mean, the question of bias is bias and error, which are not always the same thing. Sometimes biases are correct, but that it's a huge question. It shows up in all different parts of the development process I was talking about. I mean, the AI has its own biases and overfitting to data, which is a technical term now, meaning it just sort of spits out stuff that had to do with the cases it was trained on, and it misses details on the case at hand, stuff like that. But it's making inferences. That's what AI does. That's the word you're looking for. And inferences, by definition, are not perfect. They're they're an assumption or an approximation. And so the biases are always there. And part of what you were talking about is the potential biases in giving guidance.
Yeah.
Like, should you bridge this cutoff? Yeah. Because it is I don't know, right? So, a lot of that stuff, who knows how that's going to work out. If even I get anywhere further with this, because I'm not getting paid to do this right now. But one thing that's really interesting, and I bet people who have, like yourselves, who have more experience than I do with this stuff will appreciate, is that so far, just laying out the timeline and having it visible, and then clustering the events on the timeline into groups that are kind of happen around each other, which always happens in your notes. Yeah, people have like 3-4 kind of periods of time that their sampling bias likes to go to. And, just having that laid out in order, along with a basic framework, like my symptoms were going up. I was anxious during this period. I was less anxious during that period. Yep. There were the relationships happening at this time and not that time. And then, functioning, which is kind of a weird one, is like, I was doing more or better with this stuff. I was more autonomous. I don't know. Right. Having that stuff laid out is a huge deal with no inferences on top of that.
Yeah. Which I think on a good day. Yeah. I think on a good day in Bowen theory, if I'm truly working in the theory as a clinician, I think that is what I always joke. That's like where the magic happens, when I'm sitting with a family and we're popping things on a timeline, and their brain with the experience of the family is going, huh. I mean, I always say that's my favorite therapy moment, where they go, huh, I didn't put that together, that those things. Yeah. Because I think people, that's why I think Bowen theory and systems thinking is appealing to people, because there is this way that they can see those patterns if they're looking for them. I think if they're looking for them.
Well, and the family diagram was that in a much more primitive form, because you could at least just have a snapshot of not just the family structure was a huge deal, just to be thinking about the people, but you also have all these little dated facts all over it, sort of. It's like, oh, there were all these things that happened, and you imagine the timeline part, but right.
Well, and I've gotten more specific with clients about actually drawing out the timeline with them and really putting things together. Good. Yeah. I just think it's useful. I know we've had Avram came on a while ago, who said he thinks that the timeline is where it's at, really tracking these things for folks and thinking through them.
Yeah, I think the timeline is the most critical part, actually, these days. Yeah. And I didn't have that idea until an iterator reliability study that Laura Hofstad did with just, private communication with some people. And part of the assignment was put together this data from this audio recording. And my engineer brain, I was like, well, it's got to be a timeline, and now that's all I do.
Yeah.
And that's the cornerstone of the family diagram app is the timeline. It's an emotional process is a time series data set, no matter how you slice it. So, and then if you can draw like kind of artistic line graphs about symptom, anxiety, relationship shifts that were happening over time, especially anxiety and symptom.
Yeah. And just
anxiety
notice
went up for like 3 years with no stop. Oh my goodness.
Yeah. Yeah, I appreciate that. We went off in a direction which I was expecting for this.
Yeah, Dixie, you said something like simple and understandable is what I was like, man, I never do that. I don't know how to do that.
Yeah, understandable-ish. I was thinking for this. Well, my example, my prep for this episode was watching WALL-E, which I hadn't seen for a number of years, and I had watched that movie in 2008, and I remember thinking, what is this world where everyone's just going around like this and not even aware of what's going on around them? And then I don't know, it was 5 years, under a decade later, that I was like, oh, wake up, here's my phone and all these things. So anyways, it was more of just a fun engagement with thinking about how do I think about what I use in terms of technology and what I pay attention to. But I love Pixar for that. Dr. Seuss and Pixar, really good for bigger thinking, I would say.
Challenging us with the ethics around and thinking through the philosophy ethics around these things, right? Maybe that's what inspired some folks of the generation now. They would have been watching that stuff. I was thinking about my example I wanted to bring in is this trend that I've been really interested in about where people will bring their interaction with AI about their problem into my therapy session.
Really? So you've got plenty of fuel for this conversation then, because that was the pitch, right?
I got Claude. Here we go. I'm talking to Claude, telling them about my problems. I'm seeing what Claude's telling me. And I just think it's so interesting to think both with myself and with other people about when do you turn your thinking over to someone else? Because AI is just the most recent iteration of that, right? There would be a history of people that we would turn to from, when I was 13 and sitting on my bed reading like Teen Beach or something, how do I handle this? To how do we decide what our own thinking is? And do you pause enough? When this person was coming in and telling me about their marriage and they're talking with this AI about how they should serve their marriage, the question was, well, do you agree with them? Like, are you thinking about the Claude, the AI is telling you useful information? Is it telling you things that you're, interested in trying out? And the thing that I thought was interesting in a couple of them is the difference of talking to an AI interaction is I think people get less bogged down with the emotionality. So if I ask my sister what she thinks I should do about this, I'm going to have a little bit of reactivity potentially caught in that relationship with my sister. And this one example I'm thinking of specifically where this guy heard some pretty harsh feedback about their own behavior and took the feedback and thought about it. And, I think that was interesting to me. Whereas maybe if I said that feedback or their partner said that feedback, they wouldn't have had such openness to hearing it. So I just get interested at the way people are using the information and when they're using their own thinking attached to that information.
And just to clarify, the example you're giving is where the feedback came from AI, and so the person was less reactive to it.
Yes.
Right. Well, yeah, I wondered about that because the personal version of my app that I'm building now, which is absolutely 100% AI driven, by the way, so relevant. Part of the motivation that I had for that was because I found myself working through organizational dilemmas at work on ChatGPT or whatever it was I was paying for that month. And I noticed that there's some differences there, and I was willing to tell it anything and without any filter. But I also, and it was also available all the time. So I could brainstorm whenever a thought came. It's kind of wild, but you know what? I think I saw something about some data about how people are willing to divulge a lot more to a computer.
Yeah. I mean, it's anonymous. It makes sense.
Yeah. Right.
But then I think what was interesting is this isn't a one-off. Like I've had multiple people come into my office. So there's something now they already have a relationship with me, right? I'm their clinician, but there's something about you're getting the information and then you want to think about it with a human. So I'm just interested also in that piece, right? Like there was a way that multiple people have said, now I'm coming and I'm bringing this to think about with you. And I thought,
the computer was insufficient.
I don't know. Or there's something that a person is getting from, I mean, this is why I think there will always be there's something different that someone is getting from a person-to-person relationship with a human that is not, you can debate with me, that is not replicatable in what they would get from a computer.
All right, I'm going to go deep here and I'm going to keep it short. So one of the areas of quantitative research that I am most fascinated with next to Bowen theory, and I actually think you can shoehorn it right into Bowen theory as additional concepts, is collective behavior and intelligence. Ian Cousin in 2016, whatever it was, whichever spring conferences it was flocks, organizations, and families or whatever. Basically, he's modeling collective behavior in all kinds of different species, and incredibly theoretically rich way. And one of the things that we know about people and also other animals who have smaller neocortices is that smaller brains, smaller new brains, intelligence parts of their brains, is that so long as they're actually social and spend time together, they depend on each other to make sense of reality. They actually need instinctual, rapid responses like we are doing on this call with body mannerisms and everything to think. And so the question of differentiation comes up almost immediately, because it's this balance between I need all of you to make sense of whatever the scope is that's going on in this conversation, just like you need me, but we also have our own way of thinking about things. And so we almost have no ability to observe that while it's happening. It's so deep. Yeah. And so I'm just thinking about your example where that is not the same thing when you're talking to a profoundly intelligent large language model. When you go to see a person, you're instantly instinctually tied in to making sense of reality in a different way based on their opinions and the opinions you synthesize together. Yeah. So that's at least one thing. Does that make sense? Was that understandable and simple or whatever?
I've thought a lot about individuality and togetherness. My favorite example of collective behavior is watching the sardines swim and how they can just be so sensitized to the other as they move through that, and how that's replicated in humans. And I think Bowen theory has a way of thinking about that. I don't know if we can prove it, but I think I have a way of seeing it.
Yeah, right. And Jung said, you think your thoughts are your own, implying they're not. That the collective unconscious idea was kind of like the emotional system, collective emotional system, where people are just so intertwined in the way that they perceive things. So, man, I mean, you'll always have a job. I just can't imagine you're not going to have a job.
No, but I hear the anxiety in the community. Like I do hear the anxiety in the community. I mean, and not just therapists. I mean, I think there's a lot of anxiety in communities around, which is, I mean, if that's like at the core of our instinct, right? Survival.
Yeah.
Am I going to manage this transition?
Have either of you seen Pluribus on Apple TV yet, where all of humanity except for 7 people begin to share a collective consciousness?
Yes, Patrick, if you want to think about collectiveness, you have to watch that.
Yeah.
Pluribus.
Yes. Yeah. It's pretty interesting. It's a pretty interesting idea.
God, I love that idea. I mean, that's where dialogue came from. The dialogos, logos is the word or truth or something like that in Greek. Not to get into Christianity at all, but
Yeah.
There's a reason that boards exist and the Congress exists, because people have got to debate things out. It's so much more adaptive and accurate when you've got opposing perspectives that collide. And that's the mechanism.
Yeah.
It's just crazy. Anyway, are we doing our examples? Because my example goes right along with this.
Do your example.
All right. So, because I think this dovetails into the anxiety thing. I'm not sure. So Yuval Harari, author, right? Historian. Jensen Huang, who's the CEO of NVIDIA, and a whole bunch of other people all agree that, well, Huang didn't say part of this because he's pitching his GPUs right now, but that technological revolutions over history have certain commonalities. And I include, like I said before, electricity definitely, but agriculture is a huge one. Where Harari was talking about how when agriculture, so hunter-gatherers had a lot of time. It was a very low-stress existence. They didn't live as long. They didn't have much choice. And, the lion would just come and rip their head off, and that was the end. And, you got an abscessed tooth, you're dead. Stuff like that. But they had a lot of time. It was very low stress. And what happened with agriculture was you had this incredible advancement that gave you all these gifts, but at the cost of your free time. And I see that happening. It's already happened with the internet, where let's say you're going to plan a vacation. I bet you can tell me if you relate to this, but you took a much more technically ignorant plan from a travel agent that might not have been exactly every tiny little thing you wanted, with the right Uber and the restaurant with the Yelp ads and the whatever. Now it's like I spend my whole vacation getting everything absolutely perfect, but it's kind of stressful. Yeah. Whereas before you just took the brochure and say, yeah, this looks good, maybe change the flight. And I think that I see that happening now with AI, where the skills are changing. I can see it more in my job so far, where all the people who used to just spend their time writing code, for example, everybody's got to level up and become more of a manager of little AI bots that do that. You got to think higher level, but that means that now you can do 10 times the workload, but because you're constantly switching between these parallel workers. And so you're always working, you're always thinking. And I just think that that's incredible to think about as a theory, as a kind of a small theory about major technological revolutions. I think we're going to get busier. We're going to do a lot more and have a lot more choice, but we're going to get a lot busier. I mean, it's already happening for us.
But busier with work versus what I think the promise sometimes is, which is the hope of busier with leisure.
I don't know that I'm discriminating between the two, because I mean, I can use AI to plan my vacation just as well as I can get my day job done. You know, it's just generally applicable. I don't believe that we're going to lose our jobs. I think there's going to be a lot more jobs that are going to open up and demand for people, because conversely, what's happening is at work, we're using AI to do a lot of the stuff that we just really shouldn't be spending time doing. Like getting code working is not really our job. Our job is solving problems. And it takes a lot more, people become a lot more valuable to say, this is an important problem. That's not an important problem. We should prioritize that one. This is how we know we've succeeded. This is how we know we're progressing. All of that is aligning all of this tech to human values. And seems like that's becoming more valuable, and it's harder to find people that are good at that. Anyway.
So the jobs will shift. But the need for people will not.
I'm trying to calm everybody down.
I appreciate it.
Except for the losing your free time part. That might not have helped. But
Great. Man, I have about 1,000 more questions.
Maybe we'll throw a good one in there, because my example was a little bit about the therapy stuff. So I think I've already got my example in. So throw a question in there, Dixie.
I liked this. I asked my son and I asked my supervisor for some of their thoughts. I like this one. What is the challenge of AI to the human's capacity to think and reason? What's the potential for progression and regression in terms of the evolution of the brain? Maybe that goes back to my Wall-E example. Where do we become blobs in front of these things? Or things about between the generations, kids who have only grown up with tech or short reels on YouTube versus capacity for engagement with
Yeah, God, Wall-E, the fat people on the floating chairs. That's the
Yeah.
Yeah, you change your environment so much that you don't have to change it all, and everything's easy. Man, that's always stuck with me. My boss was trying not to use the latest models because he didn't want to get lazy, and I don't know. Another example of this in movies is The Matrix. Oh, this might be really hard to tie together. I had it at one point 10 years ago, but there's something about, and I'm thinking about these major revolutions again. You lose your free time. You give up a lot of yourself is another way to look at it. You gain all this stuff, but you also sacrifice a lot. And in the end, if you think about the way our bodies evolved together from single cellular life to multicellular life and on, to become part of the bigger organism, you give up yourself. My liver was hypothetically something else, or the organelles in my cells were something else. And then they just kind of became a cog in the machine. It's super dark, but I also don't know how unrealistic that is. So like the caricature from Wall-E seems a little bit fantastical, because it would probably be a lot more boring, I think, if what I'm saying is correct. They would just be parts of the fabric as opposed to even separate organisms. I don't know. I'm off in weird territory here.
Well, I thought the one thing that I'll pick out, it's me, so I'm going to attempt to bring some positive.
Yeah.
I
go dark humor. That's how I keep it going. So
but
you bring it back.
I was interested in you saying the part about the critical thinking. Is there something in the human that is useful in our ability to critically think about things, life, making choices, how we make those adaptations as a group? So I'm going to sit with that. That was something that I heard you say that was interesting to me. The computer can do the stuff. Can the human sit above it and say, how am I deciding what's important or what's not? Or, I don't know.
Well, you said critical thinking. That was your term, but how do you define critical thinking? Because I said human values.
Yeah.
But critical thinking could be another way to look at it. I mean, what did you mean?
Good question. I was thinking about the ability to kind of hold different ideas together and decide a path. But I'd have to like it's a good call. I have to get clearer in that, because I think in like the way I just described it, a computer would probably be better than me. But I'm thinking about there's something uniquely human about the ability to hold different information. I don't know if every human has it. I think if I'm to put some theory in here, right? Like someone higher in a level of differentiation, theoretically, has the ability to hold, the emotional side, the thinking side, and use both of those to influence decision making, whereas someone who's lower in differentiation won't have that capacity at the same level. So I think now I'm kind of down in the weeds, but
well, I think there's overlap with what I was talking about, because you said, I can't remember the word you just used, but you basically said balancing thinking, feeling, to use Bowen theory lingo, emotional system, intellectual system, feeling system, that sort of stuff. And I mean, a huge part of Western intellectual tradition is, and the technically liberal education is understanding, science and that world, and then understanding human values and what they have been and what they are and how to make sense of them and how to put those together. And I say human values because the emotional system is literally the biological source of human values. It tells you what's important. That's a huge part of its function. And how important, meaning like I'm really angry, as opposed to just I'm angry, that's negative, don't do that. So being able to mix all of that together is a big deal. And the term for that in the AI field is alignment. And they're hiring psychologists like crazy to do that. Special psychologists, and paying them a lot, because it's a really hard thing to do. Anthropic, who's winning the enterprise AI race right now, is, and the software development tool race right now, is their mission is apparently to make AI safe. And I think what they actually mean is align with human values. And that's really complicated. Really complicated. And your intuition probably helps you a lot as a clinician to do that when people come to you.
And that's exactly, that is exactly my takeaway. I said to Dixie, this season, when we're talking about lots of different things that are more hot topics, I think my takeaway is going to be how do you take time to think for yourself and assess your values, determine, what you're willing and not willing to do? How does that align with your actual behavior? And I think AI is a great way to think about that. How clear do you get about how you're using the tool? How do you take some risk if you're, if you're finding yourself really fearful and anxious, and get clearer for yourself? And I think that would be my takeaway for people to go out there and think about is, what are your values around technology? How do you, I appreciate both you and Dixie have kind of talked about the historical pattern of, industrial revolution shifts, like when things shift in society, how do we get clearer on how our family has done over that? Maybe that's some usefulness in thinking about how our family will manage in this. So those are my kind of taking this to the takeaway space.
What about you, Patrick? What's your resource or takeaway?
Oh, resource/takeaway. My resource was really pretty boring because I wanted everyone to go look at my open source projects.
That's great.
I could come up with a takeaway. It might be kind of weird, but I'll pitch the project. So go to GitHub, just search GITHUB, github.com. And then my username is Patrick Kidd, PatrickKidd. The repository is BT Copilot, BTCOPILOT. So anyway, but my takeaway would be that there's got to be some place for the human in this stuff, and we've got to probably every time there's one of these revolutions, we've got to figure out what that is in a more precise way or a more clear way, because we don't have to do some of the things we had to do in the past. But we got to do some other things a lot better. That's what's going on in our company right now.
Yeah. Dixie, what about you?
Well, I keep wanting to say, I think the difference between this and other shifts in history is a lot of those shifts were mechanical, in a sense. They improved the things that we did, did them faster, or we didn't have to do them with our hands anymore. But this is a little bit different in terms of the thinking part of it is now outsourced in a new way. But that's not really a takeaway. That's just where my brain has been for the past 5 minutes. So, well, thank you, Patrick. We've done like a supersized episode here today, and still I could have asked about 5 other questions or 50. But thanks so much for being here.
Yeah, it was fun. I've never been on a podcast. This is a podcast.
There you go.
I got the gear. So anyway, I appreciate it. Nice to see you guys.
Thank you very much. And I'm just going to put in a little plug to remind you that there's a lot of behind the scenes things that make this work. And so if you're interested in contributing to financially supporting that, we will put a link below where you can go to our Ko-fi site and contribute to supporting the things behind the scene that make this podcast run.
Good. And I hope our listeners have taken away some ideas to think through for yourself as you engage with technology and as you go out into your relationships. This podcast is produced by Living Systems, a nonprofit organization in Vancouver offering counseling and training programs in Bowen family systems theory across Canada.